Next on the Professional Rule Breaker.
This is John Miles with Passion Struck. And if you want to learn how to think outside the box, and something I talk about a lot is igniting the intentional life inside of you, then you should be listening to the Professional Rule Breaker podcast. I do, and you should too.
Well, welcome back to the Professional Rule Breaker podcast. I'm Kathy Walterhouse, your host and head rule breaker. And I want to start off today and ask you a question. Are you living a life that sets your soul on fire, or are you merely existing? Well, if you are, you need to listen in, because my next guest, John R. Miles, is the CEO and founder of Passion Struck. He also has an award-winning podcast called Passion Struck that ranks among the world's top 100 shows, and also the #1 alternative health podcast. He's recognized as one of the top thinkers in personal mastery and has over 2 decades of corporate and military leadership experience, including being the CIO of Dell Computers. And he's a trusted advisor, and he's sought after by some of the world's most prominent entrepreneurs and companies. And of course, he has a new book called Passion Struck. So I am so excited to welcome you to the show, John.
Well, Kathy, thank you so much for having me. It's such an honor to be here and to be able to serve your community.
Oh, absolutely. So I have so many questions for you, but one of the things that came up just right before we were talking, before we started recording this show, is you brought up the term unmattering. And so can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So one of my favorite quotes of all time is by Henry David Thoreau. And in it, he says, "The mass of men lead lives of quiet desperation." And I'm going to just say that again. The mass of men, and I'll include women, lead lives of quiet desperation. And it's one of my favorite quotes because I think that so many of us today are living this life where we have found ourselves in this spot where we get up in the morning and we just don't feel significance. We don't understand why we're going through the motions, why we're living the life that we are. And it's causing so many people to experience this unmattering, which I believe is causing these global epidemics that we're now seeing, or is a major cause of people feeling lonely, hopeless, the massive rise that we have in mental health issues. I think it all, in one way or another, comes back to, do we feel like we matter or not in life? And when we don't, it has a huge cascading effect on everything that we do.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. I mean, it's just the way that you even feel about yourself, or even try to do, either try or not try to do something. So is that what got you down the path in starting your company, Passion Struck? Because I mean, that name is pretty decent.
Yeah, that was a major portion of it. But I think what I ended up doing is I think we're best positioned to serve the person that we once were. And, you started out the show by talking a lot about the accolades that I had had. And I'm very proud of what I accomplished. But I was in myself in this position where, at really the apex of everything, I had this profound feeling of unmattering, of just apathy, just filling my life, and just feeling for the first time completely numb. And the issue that ends up happening is we don't get to that point overnight. And therefore, to break free from it, it doesn't happen overnight either. And so to me, it was, this whole Passion Struck is really a 7 to 10 year journey that I went on of truly rediscovering myself, and then how I built my life back up by really examining how what I consider the 5% create these passion struck lives, and then using the principles that I document in the book myself to build my own life back, and then now wanting to teach people how to do it themselves, because I think so many people are stuck, and I wanted to help people go from feeling stuck to becoming passion struck.
Hmm. Absolutely. I mean, was there a breaking point for you? Because when I see you have a YouTube video that's up that shows you and the CEO of Salesforce, Mark Benioff. And when I see that, I actually can remember myself almost in that same position where you may not have like that passion or that life, you know, energetic feeling or whatever it is. It's like you're almost missing something. So, what was that breaking point for you that made you go, okay, enough already? I'm not doing this anymore. And it kind of just led you to your journey.
So, something that I talk about is that so many of us are leading these, what I call portfolio careers, where we're lured into safety over passion. And it's like our choice of career is dictated more by the allure of stability and safety than by passion and fulfillment. And this fear of uncertainty pushes us towards professions that feel like that end up resulting in careers that feel secure on paper but unfulfilling at heart.
It's
And I
almost
guess
like
that's
golden
exact
handcuffs, right?
right. And that's exactly how I was feeling. And people who I talk to about this are like, "You must be crazy." At that point, when I was with Dell, I had broken through to the pinnacle of what I thought I wanted to achieve in life. I was 39 years old, making well over seven figures, had more responsibility than I'd ever had. At that point, had been asked by Mark Benioff through Michael Dell if I could help him by helping him prophesize at that point about this huge change that he was just starting to talk about, which was moving from on premise built software to cloud computing,
Right.
which today we look at it, you know,
Like
as SaaS computing is peaking, but back in 2009, this was nascent. I remember, I probably went to 40, 50 cities with them around the world to groups as small as five or six CEOs or CIOs from Fortune 100 companies to sharing the stage with them in front of 50,000 people. And it was a remarkable journey because just watching him and how much resistance he was getting to his ideas. And he was the first person that I really got that close to who I'm like, this guy is passion struck. I didn't know what those words meant at the time. But I just found myself in this position where I thought I had everything I wanted, but underneath it, I was focused on the wrong parameters in my life. And I ultimately just reached a point where I had spent so many years making other people's dreams come true and making them lots of money, but I wasn't making my own dreams come true. And I think Arthur Brooks talks about this all the time. If you've got to figure out for you, what are those things that are going to be the true reward for the life that you're leading? And it's not money, it's not all those things. It's really the intrinsic things in life, which are the relationships that you're part of and the happiness or contentment that you feel.
Mhm.
And doing what I was doing was completely the opposite of having those two important factors in my life.
Yeah, absolutely. That's actually pretty profound because I'm sure there's people out there that are listening that have the golden handcuffs. And so I think with what we're talking about, it almost gives them a little bit of a path to take. There are so many people that feel stuck, so many people that go through the day to day motions. And almost have lost their dreams. So, what do you say to those people to get them, kind of give them a boost to get passion struck?
Yeah, and first I'm going to just give some statistics so people understand that it's not just me who's saying this. I mean, there is some incredible data that's backing this up. Gallup in 2022 did polls that showed that 60% of people reported being emotionally detached at work and 19% as being miserable.
Wow.
Gartner in 2022 found that while 82% of employees say it's important that their organization sees them as a person, not just as an employee, only 40% of companies are actually doing it. McKinsey in 2022 showed that 70% of employees say that their personal sense of purpose is defined by work, but that the vast majority of them don't find their work meaningful. And then the last one that I talk about in the book is the Kauffman Foundation, which indicates we have a huge problem. We are in 4 decades of entrepreneurial decline. And one of the biggest issues, and you find this also in the Congressional Budget Office filings, is that the share of entrepreneurs among US households has declined by half over the past 40 years. And what is shocking about this is that the largest gap is among college graduates and those with high skill sets, because rather than going into entrepreneurship and starting a new business, instead they're going to safety like I did because they're thinking that they can earn more in these well-paying jobs than starting their own business and following their own dreams. So, I mean, that is just a small subset of the statistics that I looked at. Another one of these that I just want to hunker people down in is Cornell University in 2018 came out with this report where they examined people who were nearing death and they asked all of them what their biggest regret was. And the results were just mind blowing. 76% of the participants mentioned that their biggest regret was not fulfilling their ideal self. So it's the regret of an unlived life. And it reminds me of Mark Twain's quote that 20 years from now, you'll be more disappointed by the things you didn't do than by the things you did do. Yet, as a society, that is how most of us are living our lives. And so, to me, if you're at this point, as I mentioned earlier, it says it's like becoming depressed. It's not as if this light switch goes off and one day you're not depressed and the next day you have severe depression. It's the same thing with burnout. It's not one day you're not burned out and the next day you are. To me, what ends up happening is it starts coming on in our subconscious and we don't even notice that we're feeling this way because it comes in such a mild way, yet that mildness starts building a foundation in our lives that over time keeps creeping up and up and up into a point that it's moderate yet, and we feel something is off, we can't tell what. And then it's as if then something major happens in life where it peaks and all of a sudden you go from moderate to severe and you're wondering what the hell just hit you. But I think for so many people, it's this long buildup of living this inauthentic life that over time culminates into this valley of despair that I found myself in. So, how do you break free from that? I
Absolutely.
think
That's
the
a $1 million question, isn't it?
well, I think I have the answer to it.
Well, good. Let's
And
hear it. Hey there. You know, I am all about making a big difference. So I am so excited about announcing our podcast sponsor for today. They are the very last U.S. family owned manufacturer of consumer goods products. And best of all, their products are healthier and safer for you and just really amazing quality. And you know, I can do all the things that I do if I really wasn't health conscious. So this is very near and dear to my heart because they are healthier and safer for you. And best of all, they will not break the bank. So, if you're interested in finding out more information and switching your shopping to something that is non toxic and healthier for you, go to switchaway.com/rule breaker, and one of my friends will reach out to you. And just let's work all together to see if we can make an impact and switch to healthier and safer products. And of course, supporting small businesses. So again, drop your information at switchaway.com/rule breaker.
I think the biggest mistake people make is they reach this bottom pit and they remember when they were on top, and they think that they can go from point A to point B overnight. And what they're not realizing is it didn't take you a millisecond to get from where you were to the way you're feeling. And so there's no way you're going to get back to that feeling in a mere instant either. So this really starts the journey of becoming passion struck, and it enters the first of the 12 principles that I bring up in the book, which is you need to become a mission angler. And what I mean by this concept, and I love to use metaphors, is I know you used to live in Florida. I live
Yes.
here in Tampa, where we have easy access to fishing. And if you're anyone who likes to fish, I don't care if it's on a stream or on a lake or in the Gulf of Mexico, but let's just take the Gulf of Mexico example. When I go out fishing with my friends, it's not as if we get in the boat and just point it in any absurd direction, drive for an hour, go 20 miles out, put the anchor in, and start fishing. We'd be fools to do so because you're not going to catch anything. What you typically do is you're looking for the tidal patterns, you're looking at moonrise, moonset, you're looking at what fish are the most plentiful at that time of year that you're fishing in. You're looking at the areas that they're typically seen the most in. You're using fish finders, everything. Yet, when we approach our lives, are we taking those same steps? The vast majority of us, we're not. We're not angling for the life that we want. And so, in this chapter, I really bring out the concept of life crafting. And this is a concept that is deeply rooted in behavior science. I use the conversation that I had on my podcast with Hal Hirschfield, who's a behavior scientist at the Anderson School of Business at UCLA, to discuss what life crafting is. But at its core, it really comes down to what Abraham Maslow said is the story of the human race is a story of men and women selling themselves short. And we end up selling ourselves short because instead of crafting this life, we're constantly comparing ourselves to someone else, to these things that we aspire to be that are typically out of our reach. So for me, it'd be like being a podcaster, yet trying to compare my success to Joe Rogan or Tim Ferriss or Jay Shetty, who have been doing this longer, are much more mature in their practice of it than I'll ever be. Instead of looking at this future self that I want to have and comparing it to the gain that I've made from my previous self, who I used to be, whether that's a week before or a month before or 6 months before or a year before. So it's how do you create this active process in your life where you do the introspection that you need to understand the innate skills that you only have, that you only possess? Because here's a huge secret for people who are listening. You are the most amazing person that you will ever meet. And the sooner you begin to believing it, the more success you are going to have. But it really entails doing deep introspection into what are the talents that you possess that you were put on earth to utilize to solve a problem that only you are equipped to solve. And to me, that is the key to finding your purpose and then life crafting the life that you want. That's all about how do you fulfill fixing that problem with your unique skill set.
Well, I can tell you right now You are resonating with the people that are listening, that are the normal listeners to the Professional Rule Breaker podcast, because that's actually one of the things that I preach, that only you have the gifts and the way about doing things. And I love how you brought up the whole comparison, that it makes people get unhappy because they're looking at all these other people that are really successful. And exactly what you said, those people, it wasn't that they were lucky or anything like that, is that they put in the work, they took the action, whatever it was, and they may have some really unique gifts, and they really drilled down into those and made their path. So, and I'm always big about telling people to celebrate every day too. And I bet you are too, because if you can celebrate your wins every day, because I think that's a lot of it. Like, even just bringing up a podcast, right? When you started your podcast, you probably, just like me, we had 0 listeners. And then now look to where you are. I mean, yours is the top 100. And I know, because I am a podcaster, I know how hard it is to get there. So everybody has to start somewhere. What about, I think a lot of times people kind of get stuck either in a rhythm or I would almost call it like a dead space or being unconscious, because they were told that's the way to become successful. That's the way, go work a corporate job, go do those type of things, rather than even just being an entrepreneur, because entrepreneurship can be a huge risk, right? So how do you get people, I guess, over to that mindset to really drill down into their passion?
Well, what ends up happening, and you're absolutely right. And I don't care if you're an executive or you're in the medical profession, you're an attorney, you're a coach, it doesn't matter. I think what ends up happening is the burden of responsibilities. As life progresses, responsibilities accumulate. That could be rent or a mortgage, car payments, family needs. And these financial commitments make it feel like it's impossible to step away from whatever you're doing that feels stable, yet it's unfulfilling. Because this need to maintain and provide a certain lifestyle becomes a chain that ends up limiting your freedom and your choices. And believe me, I was there too. I mean, it is so hard to look at
I know you and
all the
I,
things.
ex-corporate, right? We've been there. Yes.
But do you know how many attorneys I talk to who are
Mm,
absolutely miserable? Do you know how many doctors I talk to who are absolutely miserable? So it's not just corporate people, but
right.
it's because you're living in misalignment to the life that you truly want. And most of us, through our upbringing, were brought up to point our life in a certain direction, but we weren't taught to explore how to find out what our true direction really is. And I think that's one of the biggest gaps that we have, which leads to so many people feeling like their lives are meaningless because they're completely out of whack with that. In what's going on in your heart and your reality are two completely different things. But what I will tell people is that there's an inner voice that's actually telling you the path that you should be on. And I for sure as hell was hearing it, but I think there are two voices that confront us. One is this voice that's constantly telling us to do the same thing over and over again that we're doing because it's comfortable, and we get in these patterns of just doing the same routines all the time. In the book, I refer to it as let me take this back a step. I hear so many self-improvement people talk about, you're living your life on autopilot. And I think it's the wrong analogy, because when you're living on autopilot, you're still pointing the plane in a direction. You're
Mhm.
still striving to reach a destination. I think the better analogy is that so many of us today live our lives as if we're a pinball. And We are the pinball
Ah.
in the game of pinball. And what ends up happening is we're living it unintentionally. We are just bouncing off everything in our life. We're allowing events to happen to us. We're allowing this inner voice to dictate how we're living this life. And we allow all these external influences to influence it instead of being the player of the game who learns how to control that pinball through the intricacies of life. And that's the gap. But when you start listening to that other inner voice who is telling you probably in a way that you can't really understand how you're supposed to get there. So for me, 10 years before I started this whole thing, I started hearing this voice that, John, you were supposed to be serving the broken, beaten, bored, and battered of the world. And I kept hearing this message, and I was like, what in the hell am I supposed to do with that? Here I am, this technology person who works in Fortune 50 companies, and that is as foreign to me is moving from where I am in Tampa to China tomorrow and thinking things are going to be exactly the same. It's like what does that mean? How am I supposed to get there? And I will tell you, a lot of people are probably hearing not the same thing, but something that is calling them. But the path to get there, I mean, it's scary. It's risky because in order to do that, I'm looking at a completely different financial, social, economic model than where I am currently sitting in. And yet, I don't even know ultimately what I am supposed to be doing to reach there. So for me, it really started by getting myself into a practice of mindfulness. And I know a lot of people talk about this today, and I know probably a lot of people will hear this and say, "Oh my God, this guy is full of crap." And I will tell you,
I think a lot of people don't even really know what it means
well, and
because
I
we
will tell you,
hear, because we've
yeah,
heard it so much, right? And you think, that's just some meditation yoga trying to limit what I say here. um, speak. Let's put it that way. And it's really not, is it?
no, I was the biggest skeptic
Mhm.
on the planet. And then I started thinking back about my time in the military. And one of my tours of duty, I was assigned to a Naval Special Warfare unit, SEAL team unit. And I was trained in the importance of harnessing what we think of negative energy or anxiety and to not use it as a negative force in my life, but to use it as something that propelled me forward. But the way you start doing this is you learn things such as targeted imagery and breath control and the importance of having presence in the moment and
Mm,
understanding what you're feeling. And so to me, where people get mindfulness wrong is in how they practice it or allow themselves to enter into it. So I am a person who likes a lot of motion. And so for me, the thought of sitting on the floor with my legs crossed, and sitting there and trying to put myself in a point of mindfulness is not what's going to work effectively for
it's
me.
hard to do that. It's really hard to do that.
For me, what I found to be the easiest conduit for who I am was that being out in nature and hearing the sounds of nature and concentrating on those sounds allowed me to tone out the other noises that were happening. And once you start focusing in on those, it then allowed that inner voice to become louder and louder and for me to explore it more. But I think the other thing that people think is that they start this mindful practice and then all of a sudden they're distracted again. And that is absolutely normal. In fact, the better you start recognizing that you're again distracted and pulling yourself back into thinking about other things is exactly what mindfulness is all about. And it's just this repetitive thing where the more you practice it, the better you get at it, the better you start to be able to control your mind. And For me, my favorite time of the day to do it is I get up at 5 o'clock in the morning because it is the one time of the day where there's absolute peace and quiet. There are no cars. You rarely run into another person. And I just feel like this connection with the world at that time where I can spend 20 to 30 minutes just in quiet, only hearing, the universe kind of speak to me. And it's my time to set my attentions for the day, my gratitude practices, but to listen to how I'm feeling, and to let the disappointments out, to explore them, to get into my inner self. And to me, it's that exploration that where I started this conversation is going to end up with you understanding what is that mission that you're supposed to undertake.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I, like you, got up this morning at 5 as well. So I can certainly understand that because that's literally the time. It's the quiet time. It's the time where you can just be and undisturbed and think about the things that you need to think about. And I love how you said that when you're trying to be mindful, you can get distracted, because sometimes I get frustrated because my mind will start wandering when I'm trying to be a little bit more mindful. So that's the end of part one of my interview with my friend, John R. Miles. He really gave us a lot to think about how we should be living our life and maybe crafting our life, because we want to be living a life that is just all about safety, or maybe just every day being emotionally detached, or maybe even just coming to the end of your life and having regret that maybe you had an unlived, fulfilled life. One of the things that John mentioned, it's really important to take time to really craft your life that you want. So please join us for part two that's releasing next week of my interview with John R. Miles. He's the author of Passion Struck, and I can guarantee that if you listen to this episode, your life will change. So thanks again for joining us at the Professional Rule Breaker podcast. And again, I'm your host, Kathy Walterhouse. And if you need any help in sales and in business, go to theprofessionalrulebreaker.com. And also, if you like this podcast, be sure to give us a 5-star review. It sure helps us out. And again, thanks for joining us.